Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we have a tournament list building video for Infinity N5. We have a tournament coming up here in Melbourne in May, and I haven't quite chosen what faction I want to play. I've got these 5 beautiful factions here on the screen, being Vanilla PanO, Military Orders, Corregidor, Tunguska, and White Company, as some options I'm weighing up. And I've written up some lists and tested some lists for all of them, so I thought I'd bring you guys along for the adventure. So for this video, I've got 2 lists for each faction. We're going to take a look at the tournament lineup for ARC. We're going to take a look at the key factors I'd consider when looking at a tournament lineup. And then we're going to get into some tournament lists for some of these factions. All of these factions I've done initial reactions to, and I know a lot of you guys wanted to see lists for those factions as well. Well, now's our chance, so let's jump right in. So Arcfinity is the name of the tournament, Arcfinity 2025. It's a 2-day event, and we can see on day 1, we have Biotech 4, Highly Classified, and Annihilation. And then on day 2, we have Supremacy and Megatart. Now, Megatart is a custom mission. You can find it in the Loss of Lieutenant custom mission pack. And it's similar to Looting and Sabotage, where essentially it's looting and sabotage, but the thing you're trying to destroy can shoot back. ARC, it's a more casual 2-day event. You're scored not only on ITS scores, but also painting and sportsmanship. In terms of a 2-day tournament, it's a very casual one. If you're in Melbourne and you thought, look, 2-day events sound a bit daunting, ARC's a great one to jump into. But the interesting thing for ARC is that we're playing with reinforced command, which means your lieutenant dying does not trigger loss of lieutenant. So we'll get into some of the ramifications of that later, but the first thing you have to think about when you look at these missions is, okay, what's my mission split? Now, when you look at a mission split, you want to pick out which of these missions are the hardest to do or take up the most list equity. So list equity is essentially how much of my list do I have to tool to make this mission doable. And I think there's 2 big schools of thought for this specific tournament that I've come across, where everyone has identified Biotech Vor and Highly Classified as the 2 missions with the highest list equity requirements. So the first school of thought is that you make a list for both Biotech Vor and Highly Classified, a list that covers both, and then you have a second list free to run the rest of the missions. The idea comes that Biotech 4 is 3 points for classifieds. Highly Classified is all about the classifieds. So if you make a classified-focused list, you can cover both of those missions that have a huge amount of, list equity in them, and have a second list that can cover the more generalist missions, being Annihilation, Supremacy, and Megatart. The other school of thought is that you make a list for Biotech 4, where Biotech 4 is a more aggressively oriented mission, where, missions like Annihilation and Supremacy, and to some extent Megatart, also tend to be quite aggressive. You have that as one list, and then have Highly Classified as its own list. In terms of what I'm doing, I'm sort of going the separate lists route, where I'm having a very aggressive Biotech Vor list, and then a Highly Classified list as a separate list. If you were, and this will change depending on faction and play style as well. There's no right or wrong answer here, but these are good things to think about when you look at a mission split. So let's look at some considerations with the missions, and we can sort of group them in a few different large categories, which is another thing to consider when you're doing your list split. We've talked about classified focus, being Biotech 4 and Highly Classified, as well as highly specialized missions, with Biotech 4 and Highly Classified. As mentioned, the overall lineup is quite aggressive, potentially more aggressive than you'd usually see in an ITS tournament, with Biotech 4, Annihilation, Supremacy, and Megatart, where Biotech 4 and Annihilation directly have points for killing and surviving. Megatart has to have you destroy something in your opponent's zone, which will require some kind of offensive output, and the best way to remove points from enemy zones in Supremacy is to kill them. Finally, Supremacy and Mega Turret also have a hacker bonus, which is important to keep in mind. So, let's have a talk about what factions I have available to me to play for the event. We've got Vanilla PanOceania, Military Orders, Tunguska, Corregidor, and WhiteCo. I have a few more that I could pull out of the box, but as there is a painting requirement, these are the ones I can feasibly get painted, and it's good to narrow down our scope. So what are the key considerations here? We've got a highly aggressive lineup. Biotech Vor heavily punishes forward deployment or airborne deployment due to the confused deployment rule. A hacker bonus or multiple hacker bonuses increase the likelihood of hackers being fielded. There are 2 highly specialized missions, which will likely lead to some funky or unoptimized lists for some of the non-equity missions, we'll call them. And you need to bring a list that has a plan to engage the Mega Turret. First up, let's look at my 2 lists I've brewed up for Vanilla PanOceania. List 1 is for Biotech Vor, Annihilation, Supremacy, and Mega Turret, and we can see Group 1 has Joan of Arc version 2 with a Lieutenant +1 command token, and she's in a Haris team with 2 Helot Militia with submachine gun and light rocket launcher. This means everyone in the team is getting a special die, which is quite nice, and remember, Joan makes everyone in this list who's irregular, regular. We've then got a motorized bounty hunter, as essentially your only non-hackable close assault. We've got 2 Teutonic Knights with light shotgun and Panzerfaust, who are fantastic. A Banshee killer hacker, who's a drop troop. 2 Fugazi drone bots. A Swiss Guard heavy machine gun. Then in Group 2 we have a Bolt MSV1 multi-sniper with marksmanship, duoed with a Bolt killer hacker, who are getting that pure bonus. Then we have a Warcore 360 visor, a Fennec forward observer with disco baller, and a Blink team with X-visor and heavy rocket launcher +1 damage. So what does this list want to do? This list wants to focus on maneuverability with Joan's high speed and the Banshee's high speed and my close assault units to put out multiple vectors of attack and threatening vectors of attack. The hidden deployment elements and extra command token will play very well into Biotech Vor. Usually in Biotech Vor, you need to run a number of coordinated orders just to get everybody out of the Biotech Vor zone. By having both the Blink and the Swiss Guard start in hidden deployment, I can essentially decide when it is that they will start suffering the effects of that zone. If I leave them in hidden deployment, as long as they're in that hidden deployment state, they can't be bugged by the Biotech Vor zone. They also contribute to a very strong defensive matrix, where I can put up the Bolt multi-sniper as the main piece. I have the Helots watching closer to my deployment zone, and the Fugazi drone bots watching closer to my deployment zone as well, and can keep the Swiss Guard and the Blink close to the chest and sort of reveal and expose them as I deem necessary, instead of having to sort of put them out and just hope for the best. So that's what the list is trying to do. Now, the weaker side is that it's potentially a little weak against hacking alpha strikes. The only thing I've got between Joan and a pitcher would be the Bolt Killer Hacker. Now, the Bolt Killer Hacker is quite good. As a Warhorse with BTS 6, the only way to really get to it is with a Trinity, with another Killer Hacker, and that can hopefully buy me at least an order or 2. Past that, Joan is very good against a Spotlight guided play, due to being Whip 15, and though she can be isolated, due to Reinforced Command, we're not incredibly worried about that. If we didn't have Reinforced Command, I'd definitely be taking a Magistrate Chain of Command or some better hacking defense. So this list is meant to run Biotech Vor, where it can get into the midfield and brawl nicely, I hope. Annihilation, just due to a very nice offensive output. Supremacy, we're generally moving up the field into zones, and we have a specialist who can go pretty deep. And then Mega Turret, we've got a few ways to engage with the Swiss Guard, with Joan, or with the Teutonic Knight in close combat. Now, the one strange call out here might be the Banshee Killer Hacker in Biotech 4, where she has to pass a Fizz roll to be able to deploy, well, to even start off the table. Now, if the Banshee fails that roll, it's not catastrophic like it might be to some other units, due to the very strong 6/6 movement from Super Jump, where she can get out of the zone in one order. She can also provide some more killer hacking defense to Joan, which is quite nice. So this is what this list is meant to do, put out a very strong offensive output while keeping a very close to the chest defense. I've tested this list out once and it went really well, and it's one I'd be happy running into Arc. Next up, we've got Highly Classified, where this list is built just to run Highly Classified and Supremacy. Taking a look, we've got a Bulleteer Spitfire in a duo with a Blade Op Engineer who has that beautiful, beautiful tactical awareness. We've got 2 Peacemaker Mine Layers, who are absolutely fantastic in terms of a defensive matrix. We've got that Bolt duo from Group 1, but this time we've picked up 2 Fennec Hackers. We've got a Teutonic Knight, a Camouflaged Helot Militia. Group 2, we have a Karu duo with the Feuerbach and Paramedic, a Magistrate with Strategos level 1 and Counterintelligence, a Mulebot, and a second Helot. So what does this list want to do? It's focused on very fast and diverse specialists for Highly Classified, and a few forward elements for board control and HVT defense. My main forward elements are going to be these Peacemakers, and I've taken 2 Fennec Hackers with that Bolt Killer Hacker to be able to back that up as a strong hacking deterrent. Any heavy infantry that might want to push past that Peacemaker is going to run into quick trouble, and any hacker who wants to come in to try to stage dive a unit through my own repeaters is likely to be met with significant retribution. As well, the Fennec Fusiliers can easily do a coordinated order, move 4 inches up, throw out a Fast Panda to make that hacking defense even more solid. Then it's the Helot Militiamen and the Bolt who are able to keep a strong defense up. Now, the Bulleteer duo is quite nice, being relatively quick with that tactical awareness and fast movement from the Bulleteer, where the Karu come from the same school of thought, moving up with both an Engineer with D charges and a Paramedic who has a Visor and is a Veteran. Those 2 groups are going to be able to complete a large number of objectives. And generally, I'd be pretty happy to run this in Supremacy as well, where we've got the speed to go in, press a button, and potentially get out. Now, the Magistrate Lieutenant might be a bit of a strange choice. It's got Strategos, which means the Karu don't necessarily benefit from that Lieutenant order with the NCO, they just get it anyway. But Strategos is quite nice, being able to hold back an extra unit, and having that counterintelligence can be a big benefit to an aggressive army like PanO. Now, what are the issues with this list? It's somewhat fragile. We don't really have any multi-wound units besides the Teutonic Knight, though we've got some decent recuperation in the list, with a decent Engineer who wants to go forward and patch those Peacemakers up, and a Karu Paramedic who's pretty good at shooting a medkit. We don't have any 2-wound units. The units we're getting up don't necessarily have the greatest chances to get back up, and this sort of stems from Highly Classified not really being PanO's strong suit. PanO's actually quite decent at pressing buttons, but where you really fall short is having to take this diverse spread of specialists and build a list around that. Having Banshees and Scarecrows to press, individual buttons on the midline, PanO's actually quite good at that, where historically maybe they weren't so, but having to build a list geared towards this style of play and taking up that list equity in a direction that leads away from PanO's strong suit, I think that's where the root of the fragile issue comes from. Alright, well, next up we have military orders. Now, where for vanilla PanO we did it based off of the list equity split, where one was for biotech, one was for highly classified. Military orders, I think, is a bit different, just based off of the toolkit that military orders brings to the table. It's common essentially in weaker factions, where you have to build to a matchup, not necessarily to the mission. And in military orders, whenever I've taken them to tournaments, I've built one list against a hacking matchup, and another list against a non-hacking matchup. This might sound a bit strange at first, but when you consider that military orders' best tools are highly hackable, it makes you build in that direction where you don't want to have to waste points on hacking protection if you don't need it, because that takes away from your good points. I came top 10 in CanCon last year using a list strategy this way, and it's something that works. But let's take a look at what we've got. So this one's the hacking matchup, and historically from what I found, it's the list that I'll end up playing the most, as most factions, not most factions, a number of the stronger factions can threaten a pretty decent hacking net quite well, or reaching out to tag something. So first up, we have the Lieutenant Deferzen with a Spitfire. Usually I'd say avoid Lieutenant Deferzen where you can. Sometimes you can't, and that's perfectly okay. But with Reinforced Command, I'm more than happy to take him. He's in a Haris with 2 Teutonic Knights, one with a Firewall -3 to pass that on to Deferzen. But they're both just really great, giving Deferzen that +1 special die, great close combat units, really quick as well. Next up, we've got the Knight of Santiago combat jump with the killer hacking profile. This guy can, he can assassinate specialists and hackers really well, and he does a bunch of classifieds. Next, we have a 5-man team with a 4-link bonus. We have 2 Croziers with Blitzen and EM Mine. This is one of the profiles I've been really high on for military orders, where, that Panzerfaust style defense with the Blitzen has gone so far up in value, and getting them up to that level 14 to get them up to ballistic skill 13 really hits them on a really nice point where your opponent sometimes doesn't want to risk it. Now, you can put these Crozier Blitzens up one at a time, or you can have them watching 2 different lines. If you pick, say, your Black Friar as the link team leader, have her in the center, and then put both Croziers 8 away in opposite directions, you can cover quite a decent part of the board. The Black Friar is very important in military orders as your only really effective long-range MSV, while you do have a Disco Baller in Deferzen and the Crusader. Those tools are not necessarily going to take in every list, so to avoid being pinned by something like a Phoenix or an Armand, you really need to bring a Black Friar. And the heavy rocket launcher, it's just a fantastic weapon. The multi-pistol +1 burst is brutal if someone gets close, and the nano pulsar, quite a good kit for the price. Next up, we have the Order Sergeant FTO. Just there is sort of a backup to Deferzen's regular hacking capability. Usually when you build a hacking-focused list, you want at least 2 hackers who can do regular hacker things, and 1 or more killer hackers. So here the Order Sergeant hackers just covering Deferzen can run classifieds quite well, and then the Crozier Paramedic, who's in there to run classifieds for highly classified. Potentially pick up a Crozier, but we're not exactly confident on that. And then we've got the Mulebot Evo Hacker. There was a version of this list that didn't have the Evo Hacker, and I was sort of in 2 minds about it. I found it really hard to find a composition that allowed for a Mulebot and for something other than the Knight of Santiago that could benefit from it, besides Tinbot. But, I guess if the Firewall Teutonic Knight goes down, that's something you can set up. And didn't really find much that could work and keep the core of the list intact. So the Evo Hacker is just there for the Knight of Santiago combat drop, and it also provides an extra order in Biotech 4, which is quite nice. Then in Group 2, we've got the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre NCO with the AP Heavy Machine Gun. He's really the one who's going to be doing most of the long-range gunfighting to then free up space for Deferzen and the Knight of Santiago to go forward. We've got a Raveneye, who's fantastic for defense, a Fugazi, a Tech B, who can do a couple classifieds, and then the Warcore. So what does this list want to do? It wants to focus on fast, hard-hitting, mixed defensive strike teams, where Deferzen and the Teutons can attack, by gun, by close combat, by hacking, and same with the Knight of Santiago. We've got some long-range guns which provide a really great backbone for our list, being the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre, the Black Friar, and in a pinch you can coordinate some blitzens against a hackable target. And then Specialist Assassination is really what this list wants to do. Now, similar to the Banshee Killer Hacker, the Knight of Santiago can't necessarily start up in the sky in Biotech 4, but with that super jump jet propulsion, is more than happy to cyber mask and just start jumping around. The main issue with this list is it didn't quite have enough equity to properly cover all of the classifieds. Some of the engineering classifieds, I believe the Tech B can't do. We have some great paramedics and doctors in faction, but they just couldn't fit for those sort of classifieds. But overall, I'm quite happy with how this list is shaken out. There are also a couple free points there, which I didn't really do much with. You could upgrade a Teutonic Knight, which would be quite good, and fiddle with a few other points, but overall, very happy with the list. Then we've got List 2, Sweet Freedom. So this is a list I would take into someone if I wasn't afraid about a major hacking network. So this would be something like going into another PanO faction, going into Ariadna, going into some flavors of Haq Islam. And it's when you can run this list, it's beautiful. So for this one, we've got Joan of Arc with +1 command token, duoed with a motorized Knight of Montesa as a really fast-moving team. We've got a Corps with a Crozier Blitzen, a Black Friar heavy rocket launcher, an Order Sergeant hacking device, then a Teuton light shotgun, and a Teuton with Timbot, where the Teutons provide the +1 special die. We've then got a War Corps, a Raveneye, and a Tech B. Then Group 2 has a Tikbalang of Montesa, a Curator with Marksman Rifle and Marksman Rifle Turret and Palbot, 2 Mulebots, and a Fugazi Drumbot. So this list is focused on heavy guns attached to fast specialists, where Joan is dragging around that Knight of Montesa, and the Tikbalang can drop its peripheral, who picks up the climbing plush that the Tikbalang has, which makes into a great little objective runner. There's a large volume of secondary specialists who don't necessarily want to go out, but can if they need to. That's the War Corps with the ITS rules, the Raveneye, and the Tech B. And generally it's quite a durable list, with a large number of wounds. It may struggle a bit defensively. It's really only putting up Teutonic Knights or a Crozier in reactive. And it also might struggle in highly classified, where you'd really have to be moving out that core. But with those Teutonic Knights in front, you're not necessarily incredibly afraid of that. Overall, I'm quite happy with this list as well. But as I said with the first list, you tend to run the hacking matchup one more, as there just tends to be more factions than not that have that threatening level of hacking. Next up, we've got Tunguska, who has gone back to the traditional, or at least traditional in my mind, list split, where one is for Biotech 4 and one for highly classified. First up, we have our Biotech 4 Plus list. This list is meant to run Biotech, Supremacy, Annihilation, and Mega Turret. The first unit we have here is the GoPod with Heavy Rocket Launcher, AP Machine Gun, and GoBot. I've played with this unit quite a lot. It's extremely fast, very aggressive. That Heavy Rocket Launcher melts most of what it touches, and that GoBot providing a fork is just fantastic. Next up, we have a duo of Perseus and a Stempler Zond. Perseus is an absolute machine of a unit, if you haven't come across him yet, and the Stempler Zond provides a specialist to go with him, as well as a useful sensor and repeater that can keep him safe from hackable units. It's a great little up-close assault duo, where they both have super jump and are moving incredibly fast. Next up, we've got a mix of units that can go a couple different ways. The easiest way to describe it, you've got the Rounder, Securitate, and 2 Interventors, forming a 4-man core with a duo bonus. Then you have a duo of Cheer Killers and Miranda Ashcroft. Now, if you're going first, Miranda Ashcroft can join the Rounder team and move up with them, where she can provide a good, solid, quite long-range active gun in the emitter +1 burst, which will be 3.5 in the team. And then the Cheer Killers can super jump their way around. If you're going second, you can deploy both of those teams as you would, keep Miranda as your reserve, and then whatever end of the board you feel needs the Overwatch potential, you just pop Miranda in that team, as she can join the Cheer Killers team as well. Then, and of course the Cheer Killers, they're just very fast units who can brawl in the midfield. Light shotguns and pulsars are a really nice mix, where you don't necessarily see that shotgun and template running around very much anymore, and they can quite easily make an attack run, jump up on a building, go prone. They've had a really nice upgrade with the changes to super jump. Then Group 2, we've got a pure duo with the Grenzer Marksman multi-rifle and Spectre FTO. Both of these units excel in their roles and complement each other really nicely on top of being a pure duo. The Grenzer can either sit up or sit down on your first defensive turn, depending on how you're feeling. And once the Grenzer inevitably dies, as they do, Spectre is then a super jumping monster with pretty similar capabilities to Perseus. Generally, I'd have the Grenzer team and Perseus sort of on the opposite sides of the table, where Spectre and Perseus can really get in there and brawl it out. Then 2 Transductor Zons and the Zellenkrieger for a second source of smoke in the list. So this list is all about transitioning smoothly between long-range interference and mid-range brawling, as the game naturally progresses towards the midfield as the central point. You've got very fast individual units that aid that transition and speed up that rollout in the GoPod, Perseus, Cheer Killers, and Spectre. And the enemy-facing units, being the ones taking those face-to-face rolls, are really good at winning those face-to-face rolls. The GoPod's quite good with Mimetism and BS attack -3, but the Rounder's great with marksmanship, as is the Grenzer, and anything in range within 16 inches of the Spectre or Perseus is unlikely to win a gunfight against them. Now, there is one thing I'm not very happy with, which is that this list has quite a weak network projection, where the main way to project that network is to get the Stempler up, or to get that Interventor Killer Hacker to chuck out the Fast Panda. Unfortunately, I again found this, a case where getting good network projection was just taking too much out of what the list needed to do for Biotech 4. And in Biotech 4, I wouldn't necessarily even have the time to set that network up in the first turn. Overall, though, I'm really quite happy with this list. I've tested out a version of this list and this is just minor tweaks, and it went absolutely swimmingly. Just really rolled out pretty perfect. Was able to heckle my opponent on their first turn, scalpel out some key pieces with the GoPod, and then just collapse on them with Perseus and Raoul in the next turns. Then we have a highly classified list that can run in Annihilation, highly classified, Supremacy, or Mega Turret. We've got a full core with a duo bonus, being the Kulak Heavy Rocket Launcher, -3, the Rounder, the Securitate Repeater, and 2 Interventors providing the bonus. Then we have the Stempler and Perseus duo back, the Zon Nautica hacking device, and a Zellenkrieger rounding out the first group. Group 2, we have a Haris team of the Grenzer with marksmanship, Fiddler FTO with super jump, contender, and drop bears, a Cheer Killer, Demna Connolly, a Reaction Zoned Thunderbolt, and a Vertigo Zoned. So, it's interesting to look at this list as a highly classified list, as it has the capacity to do the highly classified things, but also has a large amount of capacity outside of that as well, where I would feel comfortable running this into other lists. It's focused on being a very well-balanced list containing the required specialists for highly classified, at little to no cost to the rest of the list. The one thing we're missing out on here is a paramedic, where I could easily switch that securitate repeater for a paramedic, and potentially that is a change I will make. But other than that, it's really well covered. We've got some fast button pressers in the Stempler and the Zonautica, who can go very deep very quickly and make it back out again. We also have a vast array of engagement options, where the Interventor Hacking Device Plus can put that white noise directly on the Kulak Heavy Rocket Launcher, and any of the smoke-throwing units can put smoke in front of the Grenzer. While the Grenzer only has MSV1 and no Sixth Sense, that's usually enough to tip a gunfight in the Grenzer's favor from a fight that maybe wasn't in its best interest before. Again though, this list also suffers from weak network projection. We're not packing any pitchers or fast pandas other than the Interventor Killer Hacker, which is a bit of a shame. Again, yeah, it's unfortunately just the way the list has gone, having to take all of those specialists for highly classified, where things like Fiddler are eating up quite a lot of points, and the Zonautica, though a good unit, might be better off being something else if I'm interested in network projection. Overall, though, very happy with the list. Next up, we have Corregidor. Now, Corregidor are also adopting the Biotech Vor and then the highly classified as separate lists, but we'll talk a bit about Corregidor and its attitude towards Biotech Vor as we move into it. So, Corregidor as a faction trades largely off of its forward deploying elements, being the Morans and the array of drop troops, being the Tomcats, Hellcats, and Carlotta, where it'd be pretty hard to see a Corregidor list that isn't packing a Hellcat or Carlotta. This means that Corregidor's playing in a way it doesn't necessarily want to, and isn't necessarily playing to its strengths. But here we have the Biotech Vor list. We have a Haris team with a Mobile Brigada heavy machine gun boarding pistol, a Mobile Brigada lieutenant with multi-rifle and Timbot -6 and boarding pistol, and then Jazz FTO with pitchers, who's going to get the benefit of that firewall -6. We have a 8-point baggage bot, and then a duo of Jaguars, who are going to get a special die. We have a Panzerfaust adhesive launcher smoke grenades, who's a fantastic ARO piece and can engage at almost any range, and then a Jaguar chain rifle smoke grenades, who's great for deployment zone defense or chucking some smoke in the active. Next group, we have an Intruder heavy machine gun and grenades, who's just fantastic at winning face-to-face rolls. We're packing a second Jaguar duo, McMorrow, who's an absolute monster, and then a core of the Vostok Mach 12, the Lobo, with boarding shotgun +1 burst and disco baller, Valeria Gromaz with pitchers, and 2 Diablos, who the Lobo makes regular, so that irregular count isn't actually as bad as it looks. And it's getting a 3-person team bonus, where the Lobo and Diablos share a keyword. So this list is really focused on vision control and resilience, where Jazz can put white noise over the Mobile Regatta to do some white noise shooting, or any of the smoke throwers can put smoke in front of the Intruder. Most units are fast or are linked, meaning hopefully a very efficient rollout into the midfield for Biotech Vor, and it has myriad strong methods of engagement, like I described with the white noise shooting, smoke shooting, and then McMorrow and Jaguars, and Diablos, who are all happy to go in for the kill, and have grenades, which can attack outside of line of sight. As I mentioned before, Biotech Vor makes Corregidor unable to really leverage its strengths, but I'm actually extremely happy with how this list turned out. Corregidor lists in general can be quite hard to build, even in N5, but I'm actually very happy with how this one's shaken out. Next up, we've got Highly Classified Plus, which I would run in Highly Classified and Supremacy. We have Carlotta Kowalski, the deployment zone drop troop. Then we have a 5-man team of Lupe Balboa, with the emitter, Panzerfaust, and smoke grenades, who's the main ARO piece, at least for turn 1, an evader, engineer, AP Spitfire, who's a classified machine, another Lobo with Disco Baller, a Daktari Doctor, and Valeria Gromaz, where the Lobo, Daktari, and Lupe all have the Aguacil keyword. Then we have the Mulbrigada Haris from the last list, and a Salyut Repeater. We have a Jaguar Duo, 2 Morans, and the Transductor Zond. So this list is focused on strong forward elements and capable specialists, where the Morans and Carlotta provide a lot of reach to the list, and every specialist we have can really serve a couple of different roles and serve the lists in other ways than just doing their classified. This list wins the hacking game quite handily. With Jazz behind that firewall and Valeria behind a firewall of her own, it's going to be pretty hard for them to be engaged by other hackers. And it's a fairly resilient list. That core with the Doctor benefits really well from it, where the units there generally have high armor, so will hopefully just go to unconscious and not dead. And then, of course, the Mobile Regatta with armor 5 and 2 true wounds. Really good. And the Jaguars are also dogged, can survive a little bit past where they should, or be picked up. But this list doesn't really have the close combat element the first list had, and may struggle to push through a solid defense, even though this list plays more in the way that Corregidor wants to play. It still isn't able to leverage its full toolkit just due to the list equity of having to have all those specialists. It would be really nice to have fit McMorrow in the list, and maybe there is a way to do that. But yeah, look, McMorrow or Senior Massacre would have been great to fit in the list, or even some loose Diablos, but here we are. Alright, finally we have WhiteCo. So WhiteCo are also adopting the biotech highly classified split. This list is for biotech, Megaturret, Annihilation, and Supremacy. Group 1 we have Liang Kai, 2 Varangian Guard with Chain Colt +1 Burst and Smoke, and then Carmen and Betard, who are absolutely fantastic and provide even more smoke. Then we have a core of a Jujak Missile Launcher Light Flamethrower, an Orc Lieutenant with Heavy Machine Gun, Valkyrie with a Heavy Shotgun and Grenades, the Blade Engineer with Tactical Awareness, and Laxmi with a Hacking Device Plus with Pitchers. Then we've got a War Core. Group 2 is a Haidao MSV2 Multi-Sniper, where the Haidao are NWI Heavy Infantry. We've got a Jujak with Breaker Combi Heavy Flamethrower and Tinbot -6, and a Haidao Killer Hacker with Boarding Shotgun +1 Burst and Pitcher, and then 2 Fugazi Drone Bots. This list is focused on having fast close combat threats with resilient gunfighting. If an impetuous phase goes ideally, everyone in the list can use their impetuous order and move out of a biotech zone, or just up into my opponent's deployment zone, where they can start getting work done. This list also packs some highly effective movement and vision control. We've got most people in quite large links who can control vision with smoke to do smoke shooting, or white noise on the Orc with Laxmi, and pretty strong network projection packing 2 units with pitchers. While the guns are quite resilient, there is a lack of redundancy for guns. If the Orc and Haidao both go down and can't be recovered by Speedball, then essentially it's a spot of bother. In an emergency, the Jujak can white noise shoot, and that's alright. But if the Orc goes down, that's also the duo bonus going down as well, which is not fantastic. But overall, I'm really happy with this list. I really like how it manages to be quick, close combat, brawlery focused, while also having really good guns and a really good network. So I'm quite excited about this list. Now our second list is for highly classified, and it says Biotech Supremacy. It should say highly classified and Supremacy. But Group 1, we've got a Tiger Soldier Paramedic with Combi Rifle and Light Flamethrower. I just found Tiger Soldiers to be absolutely outstanding every time I've run them. Ballistic Skill 13, Mim -3, and Whip 14 is frankly incredible. A Peacemaker with a mine, like we saw in the first list. A Peacemaker that isn't a mine layer, which should be a mine layer. I'll have to make that edit. A Kaplan with heavy rocket launcher, light shotgun, boarding pistol. Just such a fantastically cheap unit for the value it brings. A Kaplan engineer who sort of balances out the first Kaplan's cost almost, as you do feel like you're overpaying a little bit. Laxmi and a Beast Hunter FTO, who's a great little aero piece to stick up, or someone to escort to the midfield. Then we have another Haidao Haris with the multi-sniper, Fusilier Lieutenant, and Killer Hacker. And then Group 2 we have a Guilang Hacker, 2 Varangian Guard, a Thunderbolt TR bot, and an Evo Hacker who can boost the TR bot or the Tiger Soldier. So this list really wants to leverage a strong midfield presence in the Peacemakers and Guilang. They've got some pretty highly offensive defensive units in those Peacemakers, that TR bot, a Haidao, and a Beast Hunter being options to put up as well. And again, strong network projection with 2 pitchers. The shooting is overall a bit lackluster. While I'm quite happy with the Haidao, the Kaplan heavy rocket launcher is leaving something wanting. And you can boost up that Sierra drone bot to be, BS-14 effectively, but you're still stuck to burst 3, which it's passable, but it's not ideal. I'd say I'm less happy with this list than the first one. I think the equity from highly classified takes up more from this list than what the equity for Biotech Vor takes up. But overall, I think this list is, quite passable. But I can see where it could falter if I take a couple unwise routes or something else were to happen. Alright, so I'd love to know your general thoughts about these lists and about what you think I should take to ARC. Overall, I think Corregidor is probably the weakest candidate. Maybe followed up by, maybe Vanilla PanO. I can see that highly classified lists sort of not doing fantastic. The front runners for me are probably Tunguska and WhiteCo, but I'd be very interested to see what you guys think. I hope you enjoyed this, and there are some list building principles. Hopefully you can take some examples from these lists, and they provide a good little comparison piece with the faction focuses associated. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for commenting as well. I know I've seen a few of you comment just for the algorithm, and that's really heartwarming. But hey, I'll catch you guys soon, and thanks again. Bye-bye.